So this is a live walkthrough of the Shock machine on the VulNyx website. It is machine number 13 on the website, and let us begin. So the first thing we like to do is we like to run our Nmap scans. So this is 53, I do believe. Okay. So we're running Nmap, and Nmap is going to let us know what ports are open on this server. We run it with T4, which means it's fast but not too fast. Very verbose output, which means that we're going to see output immediately after it begins scanning, as opposed to after it finishes scanning. So this is a very handy argument to use when you want to start scanning right away. We've got -p-, which means that all ports are going to be scanned against, and -s, capital C, capital V, to run common scripts and versioning information against any services that we find. So let's run the script. Let's run the Nmap scan rather, and we see that we have two services available on this box. We've got port 22 and port 80. So port 22 is running an OpenSSH server, version 7.9. It's not super up to date, but it's probably still not susceptible to any exploits. But the other port we have here is port 80, and this is an Apache HTTP server running version 2.4.38. Okay, so the first thing we'd like to do when we see that there is when we see that there's a web server, is we like to do something called directory busting. So directory busting is basically checking to see if certain directories or certain files exist on a web server. And in this case, we're going to first run the derb directory busting tool. This is a very old tool, but the word list that it uses is somewhat unique, and it also has a very easy syntax. So you don't have to remember very much about running this tool. It's just derb and then the URL of the web server that we want to scan against. So we're going to run this over here, and we find that there's a cgi-bin directory. So the cgi-bin directory, along with the name of the challenge, and keep in mind that the name of the challenge is Shock, and it's a Linux machine. That means that this machine is probably vulnerable to what is known as the Shellshock vulnerability. So what is the Shellshock vulnerability? Well, let's become familiar with it right now. So first of all, we're talking about the Shellshock vulnerability. Shellshock is a well-known vulnerability which was discovered in 2014, and it takes advantage of the bash shell, which is a very common program on Linux and Unix devices. Attackers can use Shellshock to execute commands on a vulnerable device by communicating with it via the following channels. So either CGI-based web servers, SSH servers, email servers, and miscellaneous other services. So there are many different services that can be attacked using Shellshock if it is vulnerable to it. So the most well-known method of using Shellshock is through interacting with a CGI script file located on a vulnerable Linux/Unix web server. So first of all, what we need to do is we need to locate the vulnerable script. So what we're going to do, because we know that there's a cgi-bin file in here, sorry, it's not a file, it's a cgi-bin directory, is we can try to find a file inside the cgi-bin directory so that we can take advantage of the Shellshock vulnerability. So what we're going to do is we're going to run GoBuster. So GoBuster is another directory busting tool, but this one is a little bit more powerful. But the big drawback about using GoBuster is that the syntax for using it is quite a bit more complicated than something like derb. So in this case, we're going to look for the following file extensions. We're going to look for sh file extensions for shell files, and we're also going to look for CGI files. So these are both, and maybe we can also look for Perl scripts. So these are all scripts that are used by Linux, and if we can find one of these, one of these scripts inside of the cgi-bin directory, then we can take advantage of the Shellshock vulnerability to attack the system. So let's run this script over here. And we see here that we found one file over here. It's a script called shell.sh. So we can take advantage of this shell.sh file on the server and attempt to attack it using the Shellshock vulnerability. So let me grab my notes. So the most well-known method of using Shellshock is through interacting with a CGI script file located on a vulnerable Linux/Unix web server. The Shellshock payload illustrated above uses netcat to connect to a web server's script file endpoint and injects the Shellshock code into the user agent HTTP header. So we see here that we're running an echo command, and we're sending this information to the server via netcat. So this is the HTTP header that we're sending over here to this shell.sh endpoint, and we're injecting into the user agent HTTP header over here the Shellshock payload along with a command. So the command is going to be, on the second line, another netcat command is used to connect the attacker machine, which is this IP address on port 443. So we've got this command here, netcat. It's going to try to connect to 10.0.2.22 on port 443, and afterwards it's going to run the bin.sh shell. So what it's going to do is it's going to connect to the web server. It's going to take advantage of the Shellshock vulnerability to give a command. And the command is going to be to connect to our attacker machine at this IP address on this port and open up a shell. Once connected, it's going to run the sh command to allow the attacker shell access. So what we need to do first to prep for this attack is to go over to our terminal and run netcat. So netcat -nlvp 443 to create our netcat listener. And the netcat listener is going to listen for an incoming connection from the vulnerable web server. So when we send our Shellshock command, the web server is going to send a connection to our attacker machine on port 443 and open up a shell. So let me copy that command, and then over here, this is the command we're going to use. So this is identical to the command that we saw in the slide, but I need to adjust this command a little bit because the IP address is different. So the IP address that we're connecting to is going to be 10.0.2.53. So this needs to be adjusted. Okay. So when we run this command, we're going to take advantage. We're going to connect to the web server's /cgi-bin /shell.sh shell, and we're going to have it execute through Shellshock, which is this payload right here, the netcat command that's going to connect to our shell, that's going to connect to our netcat listener that's listening on port 443. So when we run this, we see that the command doesn't come back immediately. That's because it's in the middle of execution. If we go over to our netcat listener, we see that we've received a connection from the web server, which is this IP address right here on this port. And if we ask who am I, we are the www-data user, which means that we are in. Okay, so because we're in, I'm going to put on my voice changer and put on my scary hacker voice.
Hi everybody, this is my scary hacker voice. I put on this voice when I break into servers, and I say I'm in, and that's what I do.
And then I change my voice back. All right, that was easy. Okay, so what do we do after we arrive on web servers is what we like to do is we like to upgrade our shell a little bit. So because we've used a netcat shell to connect, our shell doesn't have very much. We don't have a prompt, and what we really want to do is we want to get a little bit more usability out of our shell. And what we need to do is we need to figure out which version of Python is running on the system, because we're going to be using Python to upgrade our shell. So we're going to run this Python command right here. So we're going to import the sudo terminal module, and then we're going to do a certain function from the pty module, which is spawn a shell, which is going to be bin bash. Okay, so now we have bash 4.3. Interesting. So if we take a look at the host name, we see that the host name is shock, and now we can do our privilege escalation. So the first thing we want to do is we want to find out what commands we can run as the super user, what sudo permissions we have. So we see here that we do actually have some sudo permissions as the www data user. This is kind of unusual because this www data user shouldn't have too many privileges outside of running the web server, or running the website rather. But we see here that this user can run as the will user with no password this program right here, which is called BusyBox. So you might be wondering, what is this BusyBox program? So I've actually prepared some slides for this to talk about the BusyBox program. So we're going to do some privilege escalation because we can use sudo with the BusyBox program. So BusyBox is a program which includes a number of common Linux/Unix programs, such as the ls, cd, cat, and sh commands. And since BusyBox includes the sh program and we can run BusyBox as sudo, we can escalate privileges using BusyBox's sh command using the command illustrated above. So this is just sudo and then BusyBox and then sh. So BusyBox is going to create a shell. So we can do sudo, and because we have to use it as the will user, we have to specify will over here, and we're going to run user bin BusyBox with the sh program. So what this is going to do is it's going to open up a shell as the will user, and then we can continue our privilege escalation. So we see here that our terminal has become a little bit wonky. But if we ask who am I again, we are a different user. So we're not the www data user, we're the will user. So if we go over to, I think I can fix my terminal if I use Python again. So I'm going to use Python one more time. Import pty, and then pty.spawn bin bash. Okay, so our terminal is slightly better now. So we're going to see that inside Will's home directory, we have the user.txt file, and this is one of the flags that we're looking for. We're going to skip this one, and we're going to go straight for the root flag. So once we become the will user, we can also search and see if Will has any sudo permissions. And we see here that Will has the following sudo permissions. So user Will may run the following commands on shock as root. So with no password, they can run the user bin systemctl command. So what is systemctl? So let's talk a little bit about it. So systemctl is a utility program used for managing a Linux/Unix devices, services, and processes. For example, systemctl can start and stop services or list out all services on a system. But for our purposes, the only thing that we care about is that we can run systemctl as sudo. If we can run systemctl with sudo, we can interrupt its execution to open up a shell and obtain privileged access using the example commands above. So what we would do in this case is run sudo systemctl, and then in the middle of its execution, we can interrupt the program by running the !sh command, which is going to open up a shell. And because the program is running as sudo, then it's going to open up a shell as root for us. So let's do that. So we do sudo systemctl. It says terminal is not fully functional, and to press return. But what we're going to do is we're going to interrupt this. So we're going to do !sh and press the return key, and then we have a shell. If we ask who am I, we are root. Okay, so we are now root. So we can redeem this over here.
What are you? I'm system root.
Okay, so we are now root. So we're nearly finished with this exercise. And we just need to enter the root directory and then read the root.txt file to finish the exercise. So we're going to respect the vulnix.com organizer's wishes. They don't want us to read these root.txt files on live stream or in the write-ups. So what we're going to do is we're going to cat root.txt, but output it to a file called iRead.root.txt. So as we can see here, because the root.txt file and the iRead.root.txt file have the same size, and if we do md5 sum on both of these files, we see that they also have the same hash. So that means these are the same files, and we've effectively read the root.txt file, which means we've finished the exercise. All right, so that was the Shock machine from the vulnix.com site. Thank you very much.
Hey there, HackerFrogs! Are you enjoying this workshop? Learning new concepts and skills? If so, there's a way you can support the channel, and it's totally free. Just click on the subscribe button below the video. Also, click on the like button. And if you have questions or comments on this workshop, please leave them below the video. Thanks for listening. And now, back to our scheduled programming.